Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. We are delighted to host today's session, Best Practices for Avoiding Allergen Recalls, brought to you by SafetyChain and the Gluten-Free Certification Program over at the Allergen Control Group, as well as promoted by Food Safety Magazine. My name is Jill Bender. I am with SafetyChain Software, delighted to host today's session. Also very delighted to have Paul Valder with us, President of Allergen Control Group. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Jill, and thanks for this opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. We're very excited about today's session. We are going to be exploring a myriad of topics all around allergen control, recalls, and best practices to avoid them. We'll take a look at why recalls continue to grow and what are some of the areas and protocols to reduce those risks. We'll take a look at the role and value of the allergen and gluten-free certification programs and what you should consider when choosing those programs, and then follow up with how technology can help. Before we get started, I'm just going to mention a few housekeeping notes in today's session. This is a WebEx platform. If you are listening to this via your computer speakers and it's not coming in clearly, we do recommend that you call into the number provided. We are delighted to be able to provide a recording of this session along with the slides that will be sent out to all registrants a few days after today's session. We will be having an active Q&A session at the end of the presentation, though you can put in your questions at any time. And finally, for privacy, we have only the panelists that you can see, but delighted with the numbers of registrants and the number of people that are joining us today. So thank you for all that, and we will go ahead and get started. So Paul, why don't you share with us, certainly top of mind, recalls.
Well, thank you and welcome everybody. And as I say, I'm happy to be here and thanks for the invite. I think we're starting off on a fairly dramatic, in a fairly dramatic manner here by just highlighting some of the interesting recalls, and the purpose of this is to really demonstrate that recalls may not be as typical in your mind as you may think. We actually are seeing recalls in a diverse range of product categories, and certainly allergens continue to be the #1 cause of product recalls, not just in North America, but throughout the world. You know, we have the alcohol issues, believe it or not, that where, you know, alcohol content can be mislabeled. We also run into something that happened lately with the Blue Bell creameries. So you can see how widely publicized recalls becomes. This is a Texas-based organization. What's more importantly, what I really did want to point out today, here's one for the mislabeling of egg in the ingredient panel, and then they're contradicting it at the bottom of the panel by saying does not include eggs. So really, what is happening here from a ingredient perspective, we're not sure. But I think what can really grab everybody here is that, you know, one ingredient supplier in this case caused a ripple effect throughout the supply chain, where a number of products and brands were impacted because of this one particular ingredient. So it can have, as I say, a rippling effect that can really cause damage to and a tremendous cost, of course, to the brand. We also look at in the more recent Cheerios issue with General Mills, where there was actual reported illnesses to CDC in Atlanta, but in reality, the recall and the subsequent class action lawsuit, which happened in California, against General Mills was actually for mislabeling of the product. So even though there was approximately a 2% failure rate with the product itself, it was a voluntary recall. And again, from the charges were, mislabeling and consumer issues, related issues, rather than illness.
That's interesting, Paul. And when you talk about these different recalls, certainly there seems like the propensity of gluten-related and allergen-related recalls continues to grow. Can you just provide a little bit more insight of sort of the root cause and all the different factors guiding that?
Sure, Jill. I mean, I sort of use this as an example to show that allergens, as the consumer becomes more educated and more aware, as we have more modifications to our products and our processes, the risk of recall increases. And what we see here in the next couple of slides is, just in the case of gluten as an example, how the gluten-free diet has been taken up over the last number of years since 2009, and you will see that there's an incredible increase in the take-up of the diet over the last few years, as you can see. So it's, in fact, when it comes to allergen and gluten, gluten still continues to be the fastest growing, I'll call it free-from category with consumers. So, we need to understand why allergens are continue to be on the increase in terms of the number of recalls that we're seeing. So I think that a good way to start this is to sort of just discuss and explain to everyone that, and we all think of HACCP, and we all think of controlling and identifying and managing our risks and our hazards. But I just want to remind everybody, because there are some differences between the different hazards and where they fall. And it's traditionally, understood or thought of, I guess, that gluten is an allergen, and I just want to dismay that right now, that there is a difference. So allergens really fall under the biological hazard area, and believe it or not, FSMA just introduced or calls out another hazard, which is now added to the biological, chemical, and physical hazards that we know of and been used to, and they've identified a radiological hazard in the hazards that have to be controlled. So that's something new for everybody. But again, under biological hazard, you have most of your allergens, of course, including a lot of your pathogens as well. But when you look at chemical hazards, and this is where gluten falls into, so if you're trying, for example, to run testing, for example, on your allergens, and you use the same testings as on your gluten, you're not going to be very successful. You have to treat gluten as a chemical hazard in your facility, and as you're assessing and evaluating your risks. So we always say, and this is, I've seen so many different claims on packaging, that in the case of gluten, for example, wheat-free does not equal gluten-free. So there are many other gluten-containing ingredients in the different grains that, not just wheat, but when you do make a claim of gluten-free, that you have to understand that clearly equals wheat-free. So that's just something that we see a lot of mistakes on labeling. So what are the offending allergens in Canada and the United States? We have the big 8, of course, in the United States, and they continue to be fairly stable. The only difference is that recently, I believe, under tree nuts, they've added coconut, FDA. In Canada, we have some additional allergens that we call out as priority allergens, sulphites being one of them, sesame, and of course, your mustard, which is also not in the USA list of priority allergens. So a little bit different. So when you're doing packaging and labeling for the different countries, or you're selling your product cross-border, you really do need to take a hard look at making sure that you're meeting the labeling requirements and the call-outs, the proper call-outs for that country. I will say that there is a fundamental difference in Canada versus the U.S. in that a regulation that came out in 2012 by Health Canada that actually really says that allergens, sulphites, and gluten are treated in the same manner, and therefore if you technically are not calling out the priority allergens in your on your panel, on your ingredient panel, and on your label, then it's deemed to be free from. So I want to say that again. If you do not call out the particular allergen or offending ingredient, then the product is deemed to be free from. So it's very important that you understand that when selling your products in Canada. So if you look back at 2016 at food recalls in Canada and the United States, there were approximately 764 in 16, up 22% over the previous year. And you can see that the undeclared category, about half of them are undeclared allergens. Milk, eggs, peanuts, and wheat being the major offenders. But the other types of recalls are mostly in the pathogen area, so listeria, foreign matter contamination, E. coli, and salmonella. So you can see that allergens make up at least half of the recalls that are happening in North America right now. I'd like to show this slide because this was produced by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, which shows the recalls on gluten between April 1st of 16 and March 30. April 1st of 2010 and March 31st of 2015. And you know, gluten is a relatively small relative to the other offending allergens recalls. But I think what's important here to note is that when you add gluten and you add wheat, it represents roughly 18% of the total allergen recalls in that period. So it becomes fairly substantial.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, if I could just throw in a comment there, the distinctions you brought up, Paul, about California, and, about the U.S. and Canada, you know, very similarities, but then also the unique differences that provide more challenges to this industry, given going across back and forth. As you're about to go into here, what's sort of the challenges and barriers that creates? I'm assuming that's one of the many that you have listed here.
Well, that's right, Jill, and I had the privilege of attending the food allergen conference in Australia last month, and where it was a lot of the global players were all together, and the science folks as well, and talking about the whole allergen issue on a global scale, and how that might and what that might look like in a few years. And everybody, all countries are facing the same challenges, and not all with the same allergens, of course, and that's part of the complexity of trying to, you know, collaborate and converge this whole issue into a harmonized sort of approach. So, and it leads me into the challenges, some of the high-level challenges and barriers. Obviously, the priority allergen lists vary from country to country, and And that's for a lot of different reasons. But I think the other challenge is chasing what I call the zero threshold mentality or approach. And we all know that testing is a challenge at the very best. And so as technology increases, we're able to test to lower and lower parts per million. So different countries have different threshold requirements. Some have none, and so it becomes a real challenge to try to use testing as sort of a the definitive bottom line to provide assurances. But it's also confusing to consumers with all the different packaging claims. We have definitely have consumer challenges to deal with, and because of that really translates from the different regulations and ingredient labeling requirements that vary, again, as I mentioned earlier, just between Canada and the U.S., but every country. So precautionary labeling is a huge challenge and barrier, because you've got people making may contain statements. If you're somebody with an allergen, and certainly you're not going to entertain a product that has a may contain statement on it. So, and it's somewhat confusing. So, analytical approaches, unreliable and costly. Absolutely. I mean, we've heard from the experts in Australia, all the testing kit guys in the labs and so on, including our friends at FARP in Nebraska, that and our friends at Laval University at the Allergen Center there, that it's unreliable at best when you start adding different processes in different ingredients. And it can become very costly to try to think that you have to test every batch or test, test. So regulatory enforcement is a challenge again, and how the regulators are actually educated and how they're enforcing it is different. The risk of product failure translates into a huge liability for manufacturers. So how do we mitigate that liability, and how do we manage the risk? And then I have a bullet here that I like to include, because I think it's very important that when you're making claims and when you're trying to create and develop products, you have to think of allergens as a food safety issue. That includes gluten and sulphites, not as a health claim. And we find a lot of marketing folks and brand management folks find it difficult to differentiate between what's an actual health claim and what is really a food safety issue. So I think these are all very high-level challenges, questions that need to be on a global scene, need to be come to terms with. I think this leads us into why do we have recalls in the first place, and I think there's a number of issues and reasons. Lack of knowledge, of course, is in education. Working with suppliers, of course, we find that there's communication. There's all kinds of supplier issues, packaging errors, cross-contact, accidental cross-contact, cross-contamination within transportation, storage, and processing. And then we have deliberate adulteration, so we've seen some of that, and there's a big focus on food fraud right now. So, are those things deliberate, and how do we manage that? Inadequate processing and equipment monitoring. How are we maintaining our equipment changeovers, procedures, cleaning, sanitizing, testing? There's many different programs that all come into, or many different things that need to be part of an allergen management program. Improper identification and assessment of the risks, obviously, and the ability to track products particularly product ingredients through the supply chain and get the right assurances, again, from suppliers and so forth is a challenge. We know that. And also the changing sciences, I put this in around genetically modified foods, because I think that has a huge impact on keeping up with the times, if you will, and understanding the science. And even the scientists don't have all the answers, and that was proved out at my attendance at the Australian conference. A lot of theories, a lot of research being done, but no conclusive sort of evidence. And also, we come across a lot of manufacturers and supply chain folks that are not even up to date with technologies. And obviously, if you can implement technology, eliminate some of the room for error, human error, I think everybody would be well served to engage in some of that. Jill, do you want to talk to this slide?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just have to jump in. It's interesting when you talk about, coming from a marketing perspective, the distinction between marketing and branding versus food safety. I can absolutely see that, and I'm sure everyone on this call gets their daily alerts of recalls, and mislabeling is the number one that comes through. So with that, I think the packaging, Paul had asked me to put together this poll. We want to go ahead and launch the poll. We'd like to ask our audience here, which free-form claims do you make on your packaging? Just to get a sort of a sense from the group here of how they play into it. And again, this is, if you'd like to participate or not, we have quite a few people with us today. But Paul, do you find that as we get the results coming in, with your consultations, with your clients, is packaging one of the first things that you really dig into?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the approval process, and what's really alarming I'm not sure about FDA at this stage, but I know in Canada, CFIA, they do not approve labels anymore. I mean, they used to do that. You would send your labels in for approval, but that service has been long relinquished. So it really does fall on the manufacturer ultimately to make sure that those labels coming out of that facility reflect exactly what's in that package, because and the claims are all legitimate claims that meet regulatory requirements. I mean, it becomes even more important to engage with people that really do understand that whole labeling regulatory allergen space, because it's getting more and more complicated as we move towards clean label approaches and so on. So absolutely.
Not enough space on many products for the clean label. That could come soon enough, right? Well, why don't we go ahead and just spend about one more second, and we'll close our poll, and we could sort of take a quick look at the results. Looks like we have 20 or 30% participation at this point, a little bit less. That's okay. It'll give us a good sampling. So we'll go ahead and close that poll, and let's take a look at. I have a sneaky suspicion which ones will have the most, but Paul be interested in seeing what your take is on that. Let me see if we can publish those poll results. Are you able to see those?
No, I'm not able to. At this stage, I can't see it.
Okay. One moment. Let me see if we can pull that out.
There you go. There we go.
Okay. Great.
Well, yeah.
Interesting. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's concurrent with, if you think about the number one consumer inquiry for most retailers and manufacturers really is the peanut question. But in this, it's shadowed right immediately with gluten after that. So the number two question consumers are talking about is gluten. In this case, we probably have quite a few gluten-free manufacturers and brands on the call. So this really does sit well, and when you look at the interest level. Egg, milk, obviously, is the next. The dairy piece is huge. So this is very aligns very well with all the research that we know, and so So we'll continue on, I think, because so we got what 12% on dairy, 19% on the peanut issue, and of course 37% of you on gluten. So you know, again, it aligns very closely with the market research.
With what you're saying right now, absolutely. So I guess let's really dig in there. Why everyone's with us today? What are some of the insights you can provide on helping reduce these risks?
Sure, thanks, Jill. So I guess there's a solution really, and I might want to sort of preempt this by explaining that the allergen program that you ultimately either develop and manage within your facility, or the assurances of your allergen program that you provide to your customers, you know, needs to be clearly and defined within the food safety management system. And the idea, obviously, by doing that and successfully having that evaluated on a regular basis, will help protect your own brand, your customers' brands, but more importantly, I think there's a sort of a moral obligation here to serve the allergic and celiac consumers. So you need to identify the risks, obviously, but it's not just about identifying the risks. The more important thing is how you assess those risks. And you need to look at it from a science approach and a management system approach, and not just again from one of the tools in the shed, as I say, you know, which might be testing. So you need to have a full-on program that manages this effectively, and that's obviously controlling and how you control and manage allergens and allergen cross-contamination from incoming ingredients, of course, right through to the final product as well, and that's a big, a tall order, but I will tell you that it's not really rocket science, as they say. It's just something that needs to be included into and integrated very seamlessly into your existing GMPs, your existing HACCP programs, your existing third-party GFSI certifications, and so on. So your food safety system. How do we also work towards a standardized set of global requirements for allergens? And I know that from what I heard at the Australian session that Codex is sort of providing an open door for groups to approach them so that they can continue to work on the allergens and expand on that whole program that they started many years ago. So it's kind of been stagnated with Codex, but it would be great, for example, if Codex were to take a lead on this, and there is some indication that they may. You know, right now there's some talk about that, and if they did, it would be a big service to the global community, I think, in terms of managing allergens effectively. And at the end of the day, we need to have, and our brands and our customers all need to have a credible and trustworthy message that goes on packaging, to help consumers to better understand, what has that brand and that manufacturer done to sort of reach a level and bridge that confidence between their brand and the consumer, the allergic consumer and the celiac consumer. So, some of the high-level solutions there. So if we were to look at an allergen system or allergen and gluten management system, and again, I call out gluten and sulphites as separate from allergens only because one has to be managed through one has to be managed as a chemical hazard versus a micro hazard. So gluten being the chemical hazard. So a little bit of a different process, or assessment. but you need to base any of this whole process on what's already out there. As I said earlier, how can you leverage a system to manage these that fit and are compatible with your existing food safety requirements? So let's not reinvent the wheel, but let's see how we can leverage the wheel, I guess. Design the program, the allergen and gluten system to meet or exceed global regulations. And this is really important. You need to look and say, okay, if I'm going to be selling my product into Canada, what do I need to do from a regulatory perspective? If I'm selling it into Australia or Italy, what do I need to do? And how, how can I build my system so that I'm exceeding those requirements on a day-to-day basis, so you're not having to change them and incur other operational challenges. So my recommendation is set out those thresholds as low as you can, even non-detectable. State in your management system how you're going to do this, and really that's show us what you're doing, how you're doing it, and so on, and prove how you're doing it is always the way, right? So combine the program, the allergen program system, to become efficient and cost-effective, and integrate it with your existing systems. Verify that your allergen and gluten processor system in a combined audit process. So combine your audits for gluten or certification or for allergens with a third-party food program. So again, if you're looking at having BRC, SQF, FSSC, any of those schemes audited in your facility on a regular basis, how can you have a gluten verification also conducted at the same time, saving time and money? And you really should be looking for somebody that is, or a certifying body that you're working with that is certified in ISO 17021, which is management system certifications. So, if you pick, a CV that is only accredited in product certifications, then, you may be not getting the best value out of your audit process. And reduce cost and risk of product failure related to the dependency on final product testing. If you put a management system approach for your allergen program and your gluten program here, you will clearly be able to reduce the cost you spend on final product testing. And so at the end of the day, those savings should more than pay for these other certifications.
If I could just ask on that, so really when you talk about the end product testing, it's really applying the preventive measures up front. Is that what you're referencing there?
Absolutely. A management system, as I said earlier, starts with the supplier, and how you're approving and managing those incoming ingredients right through to the end product. Now, the more or the best assurances you can get from your suppliers regarding the ingredients, the lower your costs should be of having to test and do all kinds of other, interventions. So, your retail clients ask your manufacturers for GFSI. Why do they do that? Well, they do it to protect themselves and get the best assurance they can from their supply chain. So it's no different than you as a manufacturer asking something similar of your supplier. So we see that now happening Tier 2, Tier 3 suppliers, those types of requests. And the next slide is really about management system requirements, and these are probably fairly common and familiar to most of you out there, but basically I wanted to just tell you that I attended, last week I was attending a Safe Food California conference where David Atchison talked about FSMA quite a bit, as he normally does. And it was interesting, though, to hear that how the risk under FSMA and how FDA looks at how the risk is passed through the supply chain. And so no longer, are you going to be able to assume that your supplier is holding all that risk, because they can actually pass that risk onto their customer, and you need to be aware of that. But again, using management systems and preventative approaches, you're going to hopefully manage that more effectively. So again, we always start with the management commitment, but in this case with allergens and gluten and sulphites, the ingredient supplier approval and controls are extremely important. And also identifying the sources of allergens and gluten. Believe it or not, there's hundreds and hundreds of sources of gluten and allergens. And, being able to identify that and those sources in the ingredients even is a challenge in itself. Also, sanitation and product allergen gluten testing, very important. Again, depending if you're a non-dedicated facility, obviously you're going to have a tremendous amount more of changeover work to do in your plants, and a lot more cost associated with that, of course. But you also need to look at doing proper using allergen test kits and gluten test kits for your sanitation and your product testing. And lastly, what I really focus on, and I think the auditors will focus on when they come in, is they want to see that you've done the risk assessment. They don't want to just see that you have it documented that you will, we need to do a risk assessment, but it needs to be a documented risk assessment on the allergen, your specific allergen that you're trying to control, and on gluten. So you need to be able to understand how to do the risk assessment and document it effectively to present it to the auditor when they come in. So again, those are the sort of the highlights of what I would say are the key points there. And employee training, of course, is very important. How are we doing for time, Jill?
Yeah, we're tracking pretty good. We have a little bit more to get through, but we're okay.
Okay, so how do we get started in terms of building a proper allergen program? And again, you should be thinking of verifying and validating your allergen system, not your product. Think about that carefully. You want to be managing the whole process and certifying or having it recognized. You don't need to have every product certified. So that's a big sort of mental shift that we have to get our heads around. Become educated, take an overview course, understand the regulations, and utilize a certification as a support to what you're doing. Do some gap work if you need to. Assess where you're at now versus where you need to be in the allergen piece. And again, make sure you select a team. And everybody says this, but I put senior management needs to be part of that team here. But it's no different than a HACCP team but you're going to broaden it out maybe and do a little more cross-functional in this case. And make sure you're reporting properly. So once we've done that, you've got all that together, you're going to develop and implement the management system itself for allergens and gluten. And, there's such a fast-changing landscape out there that you need to continue educating yourself and training on things and thank you for attending today, because it shows your dedication to wanting to continue to do that. But it is a fast-paced world, and we need to stay ahead of things. Do an internal audit process, conduct your internal audit, but make sure you include an in-depth look at your allergen program when you're doing that. And what we've learned from manufacturers in the business is that gluten needs to be called out within the allergen program as a separate set of requirements, but as part of, you don't need to build a whole separate system. So does sulphites. And so if you've got some of these things that are components that are a little bit different than sort of every other allergen, let's say, then you need to call those out so they're easily identifiable when the auditor comes in. And then, everything else is really that you ensure that any changes in your processes or your products or organizations or new equipment and so on, that you do take the steps necessary to make sure that it's reflected in your food safety, allergen, and your gluten management system.
It's interesting, if I could just mention, when you were talking about not creating a separate system, but adding it to your current one, whether it's GFSI or, I know when we host our monthly sessions, FSMA Fridays with Atchison, he always calls out that it's not reinventing the wheel, but it's making sure that what's needed is incorporated into your current system. So I think that's interesting, that call out that you had there.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, I'm sort of going to get through some of these. For Jill, that's a good point, and I'm glad we're all on the same page. Some helpful tips. Again, a lot of this is really looking to outside people for help. Not everybody can be an expert in everything, and especially in a smaller business, possibly you don't have the resources in-house. But get a consultant that knows what they're talking about in allergens and gluten. I mean, that's important. And then make sure that you train your folks properly, both your permanent staff, but also your hourly folks too, or your part-time people. It's really important that they are committed and are part of this process. And also, make sure your label review process is verified properly. And if you have to use an outside person, do that, but get another set of eyes on what you're doing, I think is very wise. And from a testing perspective, we always recommend that, that the facility use an analytical expert to help them with their internal testing needs. Once a year or more, you're going to be outsourcing your validation process to validate your system is working properly and your results are correct, and you need to engage a 17025 food lab that are actually accredited in the allergens and the gluten testing protocols that you need. You can go to a 17025 lab, but they may not be accredited in the scope of their accreditation for your particular needs, so make sure you check that. And conduct internal audits using trained employees. And lastly, look for a management system certification approach. Ask your certification body if they're certified in management systems, which is 17021-1 from ISO. And lastly, as I mentioned, consider how you can use technology to leverage and more effectively manage your system. Believe me, a quick anecdote here. I sat with a CEO of a big meat company for lunch a couple of years ago, and his question to me was, how can I get all my quality assurance people to do the job they're supposed to do? I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, how can we get them from outside behind the desk and filling out forms to actually getting onto the floor to do what they need to do? And I said, well, you need to automate your system and get some automation in here so that you can free them up from doing all that paperwork and get them out on the floor to evaluate things. So very important. Jill.
No, absolutely. And of course, I'll vouch for that technology part of it. We're going to go ahead and just open up this second poll. This will be our last quick one, and we'll do a little shorter part. But I think what's interesting here is obviously lots of certifications out there, and so we're just asking which is your product following any of these recognized standards. And I certainly have my suspicion of which ones are the larger ones, but some of the other ones will be interesting to see as well. We'll just take just a few more seconds here in the interest of time. I see people are responding a bit quicker, and we'll take a look at the results and sort of wrap up, I think, with the last part of Paul's session and really looking at some of the certification programs and the distinctions of those. So let's go ahead and close the poll, and why don't we see, Paul, what we have, if you want to share some of it, of the results.
Sure, just waiting for it to appear on my screen.
Okay, let's see if it shows up there.
Here we go. So let's see if it's consistent with our previous poll, but it's not. So a tremendous amount of folks, about half the folks, 45% on organic, 48% said kosher, 52% on GFSI schemes, which is terrific, and that also says a lot. And peanut-free, obviously, because of the lack of certification out there. But if you're making a peanut-free claim, it's only 2% of you that said that. And of course, gluten is still gluten-free is 29%. So interesting numbers there.
Very large claim. I'd be curious about that poll on the gluten-free angle 5 years ago, based on what you shared with us, right, as far as gluten-free.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's still.
So, yeah, why don't we just take a minute or two to go through the next few minutes on the certification programs for the role and the key factors to consider.
Thanks, Joe. And in the interest of time, I'm sort of going to go through this a little quickly, but not many people talk about accreditation, and I really do think it's important to bring to the surface here that, it's something we don't see as retailers or manufacturers, but it's in behind the scenes of all the certifying bodies that you work with. And I think it's really important to understand that there are different accreditations. So the audit companies become audited by an accreditation body. Every country around the world has them. I've given a couple of examples here. JASANS is the Australian folks that audit and hold accreditations with CBs in the Australia, Asia Pacific market. ANAB, ANSI ANAB, we're probably more familiar with in Washington, and UCAS in the UK area. And these folks, it's important that when you're looking for certification, that you make sure that you're getting. Again, I'm a big proponent of the management system. FSSC 22K is a management system. BRC and the other GFSI are under product certifications, believe it or not. But if anybody wants to talk about this in more depth, I'm happy to do it. But I just want to make sure that people understand that accreditation is very important to the value that you get and receive at the plant certification level. Just a sort of a schematic of how that might work. We see that that the accreditation on the right-hand side of the screen, it happens between the scheme owner, in this case the gluten-free certification program and Allergen Control Group, and the certifying body. So basically, it's another set of eyes that are overseeing the audit process and making sure that your certification body are following the rules of the scheme owner. So I think it's really important that that's a huge value ultimately to the manufacturer and to the brand owner. So combined audits, get a combined audit as we talked about, if possible. Annual certification audits in some of these programs, and certainly our program can be conducted in dedicated and non-dedicated free from manufacturing facilities. The audits have to be and should be conducted by a third-party ISO accredited certifying bodies and also trained auditors. Are the auditors been trained in the allergens or the area that you're looking for? Are they just generalists at very best, but really do not really understand the how, let's say, gluten or sulphites or certain allergens become present and become offending? And I think that we like to talk about our gluten-free certification program as being able to be combined with other audits, or as be conducted as a standalone audit. But there are a lot of efficiencies you can get when doing this. So the strengths and benefits, really, in a nutshell, you can certify a dedicated or non-dedicated manufacturing facility, and I'm going to reinforce that. Certify the facility and the management system, not the product. Operational efficiencies with combined audits. Through a management system approach, you're going to reduce testing costs. You're going to reduce the likelihood of a recall because you've got more preventive approaches in place. You're going to be able to expand potential new business because your facility is certified, and so you could attract a lot of new private label business, which is a huge growing area in this space. So, and you're going to be able to gain brand relevancy to millions of consumers if you choose the right consumer-facing message or trademark on your packaging or statements on your packaging. And so I always say that you're promoting corporate social responsibility here. Again, it's a food safety issue. So it's important as from a corporate perspective that you promote this responsibly and do the right thing. And I always say at the end of the day, it allows the CEO to sleep at night, so by doing the right thing. Thank you very much, Jill.
Now I would say it allows everyone within the dedicated food safety and quality teams to sleep a lot better, right? And I know you referenced technology quite a bit, so I will take that opportunity just to spend a few minutes on how technology is being leveraged to further facilitate and mitigate your risk and the controls that you're trying to achieve within all your food management systems, but more importantly, what Paul's been talking today, and helping mitigate that. So what I like to do is just really quickly, I always like to start with, and if I was in a room live with everyone, I'd ask them to raise their hands, but certainly the question would be is how many people rely on their smartphone? And I'm going to guess 100% people raise their hand or both hands if you have two. They really do make us smarter. I certainly rely on it, whether it's my social or news feeds or the maps or Fitbits or whatever the case may be. It's really the live data and the convergence of data and how that's impacting our everyday lives that I don't think a lot of us, I think we take for granted. Our real-time data really does keep us informed, more efficient, and certainly I'm going to say smarter decisions for the most part. And why this correlates to the operations, when you think about it as well, you are relying on data every day. We talked about this as far as the different data points that Paul talked about across your systems, really across your operations and throughout your supply chain. Yet what we see is that the data is not typically available in real time, right? So it's not actionable, and that real-time data is not giving you the efficiencies to really be able to control and be more efficient at food safety and quality assurances. So without having that real-time data, if you think about it, the challenges are pretty evident. Lots of data, but the whole proverbial data rich and information poor because you're being a bit more reactionary and not having that transparency or instant information intelligence to make decisions, which we certainly know adds to the risk. Not having that real-time data, we have these risks every day. We talk to our customers, prospects. We know this is your daily proverbial of trying to mitigate these risks, whether it's line shutdowns, the ways, the reworks, the delays, and right now the way data is collected and analyzed, if it's not in real time, that further makes a higher risk. What we often show, and just in respect, and it goes back to preventive proactiveness within your systems as opposed to being reactive, and it really does show from the cost of resolution, the discovery time, that it does go up quite a bit higher. And we always look at, okay, well, how do you stay on that lower level of the data spectrum and that sweet spot of low cost of resolution and quicker discovery time of issues? And we really can say it's actionable data and having it in real time. So I'm just going to spend about a minute or two more to talk about how technology is helping unlock that data that you have everywhere currently and really make it actionable to help your facility, help your operations out throughout getting the knowledge you need. Really comes down to 4 key areas: program automation, the smart data collection, combined with real-time data analysis, which then provides live business intelligence and centralized records. So let me take you through that very quickly and what we mean by that. From an automation technology standpoint, it provides the additional level of control and the monitoring that's needed, that's ensuring the execution of your plan. Goes back to that be able to sleep at night component. Also, the whole do what you say what you do, and make sure it's properly documented. Automation enables that, whether it's the supplier allergen programs, all the SOPs, program requirements, customer specifications are all in the system and provide automatic alerts and workflows and dashboards to make sure that those are happening for program execution. And then you add in, excuse me, see if I'm not quite sure what happened to my slides. Are you able to see my slides?
No, Joe.
I'm not quite sure what happened there. Let me see if I can grab that back up. Well, in the WebEx time frame here, let me, one more second, please. Dane, if you're on that call, why don't you go ahead and try to do these sessions, the slides. That is very odd, but let me go ahead and just take a look at the interest of time. I think the key things that I was looking to share was just in regards to getting access to that real-time data. So one moment, I'm just going to ask Fane if you can try to upload new slides. We'll finish this up. And while she's doing that, Paul, I'm going to take this advantage here. There are a couple questions that came in. So why don't we switch gears and answer a few quick questions, and then hopefully I can just sort of wrap up the part around that. There was one interesting question. Oh, looks like that came back up. Thank you. So I'll go ahead and throw this in here as well. It's just in regards to the gluten-free claims on non-food products, such as bubble bath, seems to be coming up quite a bit. Any thoughts on that as far as beyond food products, that claim?
Sure, Joe, and that comes up quite a bit. I know we've seen a growth in a lot of other categories that we did not necessarily expect. Our feeling and our approach to the gluten-free certification program with our celiac partners is that we're really only concerning ourselves with ingestible items, not skin contact. Now, one should be aware that there is a difference between gluten, being sensitive to gluten from a celiac perspective and a gluten sensitivity aspect and an allergen. So gluten can cause an allergic reaction on your skin, just like any other item can or any other product can. If you put makeup on, I don't put makeup on, but I'm sure that if you were to put makeup on, you could have an allergic reaction to it. It's no different than gluten. If your skin comes in contact with gluten, right, you could have an allergic reaction to it. However, it is not the same as having a celiac autoimmune reaction, a disease reaction, or a non-celiac gluten-sensitive diagnosis. It's a totally different, thing. Yeah, one's an allergen and one is actually, a disease.
Oh, interesting. Well, let me go back. Now we have our deck up, and I'll just sort of finish this up, and then we'll get to a few more questions. For those that can stay on with us, that would be great. And thank you to our host, Fane on my team, for getting the slides back up. I just wanted to follow up with sort of the key 4 areas that technology can help. Once you have your program automation, really the key here, and this goes back to Paul's story he was talking about when he was talking to a manufacturing CEO, is providing the tools to your team to be more efficient and prevent versus reactive. And the key thing here is really the smart data collection, whether it's via mobile apps, so getting rid of your paper forms, whether it's integrations with equipment for real-time data or online supplier portals. It's the idea that you're now going to be able to get real-time analysis against your data and specifications to provide you that instant notification if something is astray. So again, it's the idea that you're eliminating latent review of data, and this is a key component. The other area, and this is where it really starts to get interesting, and I think where people, when they see technology benefits, is the fact that you now have live business intelligence. So the concept here is being able to do an ongoing assessment. Is your programs working? Where are the gaps? You know, for instance, is there a trend within the supplier, perhaps in ingredients that keep coming in wrong, or with your supplier audits, trends and challenges that have to be addressed, or perhaps a missing sanitation check. So it allows you to really get a sense of the overall trends in your operations, whether it's real-time or historical, to support that continuous improvement. And then when it ties all together, it really is the idea that you now have all your centralized records in one system. And in many systems, such as SafetyChain, or I shouldn't say many, but within SafetyChain, we have the advantage of being able to tie records to individual program requirements. So for instance, one sanitation check might apply to your GFSI scheme, your HACCP, your gluten-free, and that could all be tied in. So you really could just log in and be able to respond to audits or inquiries pretty quickly. But I think the real power here is the capability, to, again, to track your trends, identify a root cause analysis a lot easier, especially if, you know, should you get in that situation where you're part of a recall, whether it was you're initiating it or an ingredient that came in. So I know I went through very quickly, but I think the idea here is when you think about real-time data, it helps us achieve better everyday results, and that's what technology can afford as well, and really helping mitigate your risk and control your costs and compliance. So with that, there are a lot of questions that came in. In the interest of time, I am going to go through and just give a little bit of a call out both to Paul's organization and also some next steps. Paul, would you just share real briefly a little bit about your company?
Well, just quickly, and again, in the interest of time and not to bore everybody to death, but, you know, we have the Allergen Control Group is based out of Toronto, Canada. We are certainly engaged on a global scale and partnered and strategically aligned with many organizations around the world to perpetuate a convergence or a harmonization when it comes to standards around allergens, gluten, and sulphites. And also, you know, we come from the food safety background industry, compliance and standards industry, so we understand, you know, how important it is to gain operational efficiencies, drive costs down where at all possible, and to ultimately reduce the risk to protect the brand. So, you know, I think we have a unique offering around gap assessments, standards and audit development, training, program implementation, and then, you know, using technology and working with companies to, you know, help them monitor and report on their compliance needs.
Great, and I know there's additional bonus when you thank people for joining and continuing their education. I believe you're offering also a discount, correct?
Yeah, so we're really, we're very, very excited to recently have launched in the last couple of weeks, actually, our online certification for gluten-free for industry and consultants. And today, because of the webinar, we're actually offering a $50 discount off of the online training for anybody that's interested. They can contact us or click on the link there when they get their copy of the presentation, and we'll be happy to supply a discount code so that they can go in and take that training. It's well worth it for all folks in a management supervisory capacity within a manufacturing environment.
Great. We'll be sure to include that link in the follow-up email to make it easy for everyone to find. Also, just for those not familiar with SafetyChain, and I was so delighted to see so many of our customers joining us for today's session. But for those not familiar with SafetyChain, our food safety and quality management solutions help reduce the risk and control costs and ensure compliance. I really think it's that real-time visibility and the knowledge that not all technology, if you're just managing documents, that's not going to give you the real-time visibility. If you're just collecting data, but it's not going to centralize the system with intelligence, really all those pieces we talked about that really heightens your ability to achieve better results. So for those interested, we have supplier compliance solutions, food safety and quality, CIP optimization, as well as material loss. And what we're going to do is, Paul and I should have asked you, do you have about 5 more minutes to stay on to answer a few questions that came in? I know we're over the time frame. That would be great. But for those that did have to log off or have to log off, again, the recording will be sent in the next few days. There is a request form for easy information when you log out. A couple white papers and other information that's available. We'll send you links on the Allergen Control Group's site. If for those that are going to be ISP, that's coming up quickly in Tampa, Florida, SafetyChain will be there. We'd love to see you. As well as we do have a live product demo taking place in July. So with that, my goodness, we have gotten quite a few questions in, and we do capture these questions. So if we don't get to yours, we'll do our best to answer them offline. So in the interest of time, let me go ahead and just pull out a few. You know, it's interesting, and this came up a few times, Paul, so I will go ahead and put that out there. Was really a reference to the statement about allergens falling under chemicals and not hazards. A few people were sort of the first time that they've heard about that, so I don't know if there's any more information on your distinction, you know, in labeling them one versus the other.
Sure. You know, I'm going to defer that question to Jessica Burke, who's with us today. She's our technical and compliance manager, and I'll let Jessica address that because there may have been a misunderstanding.
Oh, great. Thanks, Jessica.
I'll just ask you to repeat the question one more time. I think I know what you're getting at, but could you just ask it again?
Yeah, and I was kind of rolling a whole bunch of the questions that came in, so probably about 3 or 4 that when we're talking about the allergens that fall under chemicals versus microbiology hazards.
Yeah, so sorry, that was actually a mistake. Allergens do fall under chemical hazards, not okay. Biological hazards.
Okay.
So just to clarify.
I had a feeling that was the case, you know, and Paul, you and I had talked about that before, so I think when that came out in the interest of time, we've kind of sped through that, so thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Let me go ahead and roll up a couple other ones. This one I think is interesting. It's just in respect to what can retailers or brand owners do? And it was more of a broad question about reducing the risk, but I think I'll narrow it down just a little bit for you, Paul. You know, when you have the supply chain and, you know, each step of the way of being able to rely on that supplier going to the next brand, but ultimately end stops at the retail level or the consumers, right? So any suggestions for retailers or brand owners beyond what you've outlined that, you know, can help them control those risks?
Yeah, sure, absolutely, a good question, and you know, we run into this all the time, and you know, we found that depending on the country, believe it or not, retailers have a little different approach to how they manage their brands, and mostly it boils down to liability issues, but you know, in order to reduce risk for their own branded products, for sure, you know, it's really important when they're looking at certifications in the allergen space and gluten space that they treat this as a food safety issue and not think of it as a health claim. So my recommendation is clearly to make sure that your risk is controlled on a consistent basis. The misnomer in the industry is that GFSI exists and all those schemes, food safety schemes, are benchmark equivalent. Well, we don't have a GFSI equivalent in the allergen space. And so it's a misnomer to think that all these other certifications are actually equal or equivalent. So I would be very hesitant in making that assumption, and make sure that the suppliers that you're working with are all on the same page from a certification perspective when it comes to allergens and gluten, and that way you manage your risk across your supply chain in a consistent fashion. And also and the added bonus to that is that from a marketing and brand management standpoint, you can also drive a consistent consumer message about that certification. So where you can't do that if you have multiple certifications and claims on different category packaging within the same brand across across the retail brand offering. So I think that mitigate your risk by doing the same thing you do with GFSI. Do the same thing when it comes to looking at other certifications.
Okay, great. And there was a question in regards to the SQF code. I'm going to ask, well, perhaps you can answer that question offline, I guess, with their new release that they just have. So let me just wrap up with just one more question, just regards to the, there was a peanut question. I'm looking for that. For a peanut-free, does that need a certification was the question, if I could find this question.
Sure, and that's a really great question. There is a peanut-free certification available in the province of Quebec. I'm not sure how far they reach with that certification, but peanut has been one of those, of course, that has been from a risk and perspective has been one that many folks are hesitant to sort of qualify or tackle. And one of the reasons for that, again, it's a product certification, and that's the only thing that's been available, and therefore it's hard to manage that and provide that assurance. So my recommendation is that a lot of companies will make a self-declaration that the the products remain a peanut-free facility. I can tell you that we at Allergen Control Group are working towards a management system certification for specific allergens, and peanuts will be part of that.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I'd love to push that out when you do have that to our customers and so forth. That information, that's great. Okay, wow. Who knew, Paul, when we first met at the GFSI conference back in Houston this year, the overwhelming response on this topic. I'm not surprised and delighted that we were able to bring this together to the audience. Thank you so much for all your information, and I know the conversation certainly will continue on this very important topic.
Well, thank you very, very much again for the opportunity, to Jill and your team for helping put this together. And I also want to thank many of our customers who I see attended today as well. And I just want to say, we have an open door policy at Allergen Control Group. We're more than happy to chat with folks. Just give us a call, and we're there kind of thing for you.
No, absolutely. And again, thank you for everyone for sticking with us. And we really look forward to continuing the dialogue. Thank you so much, and we'll be all hopefully talking soon.